Hi everybody, my name is Lena. Welcome to my channel. This is my first video and I'm a complete newbie with a camera, so please bear with me because it's probably gonna be awkward first time. Before we start, I want to mention that while this first video is about books, my whole channel is not gonna be only about that. I've always enjoyed watching other people's YouTube videos and I really like those little glimpses of their lives, their interests, and I want to share that about my life as well. So it's gonna be some books, some vlogs about life, some art, probably some sewing, just cozy vibes. And I hope you leave these videos feeling like you've just visited a great friend and had a nice time. Let's start. So in January, I read 6 books. I have my notes here, so I'm gonna be glancing to them sometimes. And not all of those 6 books were very good reads, but they were all somewhat okay. In general, I'm quite a generous reader. I give good ratings. I don't think I often give less than 3 stars to a book unless it's really something I really got irritated about or didn't like. Otherwise, I try to enjoy and encourage because from what I understand, writing a book in itself is such a big thing. The first book that I read was The Gentleman Was Right, and it's an advanced reader copy that I got from publishers and the author for free in exchange for my honest review. It's written by Britt, Belle, and I rated this book 3 stars, which is a pity because usually I'm a fan of historical fiction and historical romances, and while I had great expectations about this book, it didn't live up to them. The book introduces us to our 2 main characters, Edward and, if I'm not mistaken, Violet. So the way 2 main characters meet is that Violet and her younger sister, running away from a difficult situation, they pretend to be the cousins of Edward and live in the manor that belongs to him and his brother. Edward and his brother, they realize that the expenses of upkeeping that manor or the house in the countryside are growing unusually, and Edward, who is a second son in the family, so he's not the heir to the title, he's a second son who's kind of doubting what to do about his life. He's feeling lost and doesn't have a clear goal for himself. He immediately jumps on the opportunity to just check on what's happening in the manor once his brother tells him about it. And so he travels to the countryside, and there he meets Violet and her sister. And what felt kind of disappointing to me and a little bit unrealistic and forced or rushed rather in the plot was that as soon as Edward meets Violet and her sister, one, he forgives them for lying and pretending to be someone they are not, for squatting basically in his house, and immediately he likes Violet, the way she looks and her character, even though he doesn't know much about her. And immediately, I think in that first conversation, maybe the second conversation they have, he offers her hand to help her get out of the dangerous situation that she has with her previous fiance. That kind of felt rushed, like we already were forced to jump into this relationship without getting to know the characters that well first, without them getting to know each other that well. And because of that, the whole relationship, the way it progressed that fast, and all of the events that happened to the main characters just felt unbelievable to me. And I felt like the characters didn't have the space to grow, or rather, me as a reader, I didn't have that time and space to get to know them, see their progress, their growth. And I guess because of that, I just didn't enjoy the book that much. And that was 3 star read for me. Second book that I read was The Wood at Midwinter, written by Susanna Clarke. And it was a buddy read. I think this book is 60 pages long, maybe not even that. It's a very short novella. The main character is Meraudis Scott. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that terribly. English is not my first language, and all these names, they're very interesting, so to say. So that's the main character. I'm gonna call her Scott for the simplicity. She's a young girl who travels with her sister in a chariot. Her sister, I think, 2 dogs and a pig named Apple, which was so cute. they travel to the forest, and her sister lets her go alone into the forest and just have her time there. I think from what I understood from the novella is that Scott, she's, well, I would say she's neurodiverse probably, but the way we're introduced to the character is that she can talk to the trees, she probably has some magical abilities. The whole book has this magical aura about it, and it's the events that happen in the book, the time that the sisters are going to the forest is the time of Midwinter festival. So there's this whole magical system in the book, and this book was an immediate 5 stars for me because, like I said, there's only probably less than 60 pages, but there's so much character, so much magic, so much charm in this small book. It's such a small book that is so big at the same time. It was really, really wonderful to read that. I think the best I can say what I experienced reading it was that this book made my heart soar, as if my forest loving heart was finally understood and finally seen. So that was really nice. If you explain the plot like it is, it sounds so simplistic. She goes into the forest, talks to trees, talks to the dogs and the pig named Apple, meets a fox and a crow, I think, decides she wants children and has a child, which is a bear. It sounds weird when I say it like that, and that's why I don't like just talking about the plot, but the book is written in such a beautiful way. It's also illustrated very beautifully. It's so magical, so beautiful, has so many different layers, you know, like the metaphors and the whole linguistic magic. Yeah, I just want to recommend it to everyone. Just read it for yourself, see how beautiful language can be, and see how such a small book can contain so much and such a beautiful world in itself. So that was The Wood in Midwinter. Not the best review, I guess, but those are my honest feelings about it. The third book that I read, it was also a buddy read or like a group read in the same Goodread group. So many more people read it, which was really actually nice because then we could discuss about it. It was also a book that I had a lot of mixed feelings about because I went into it expecting, again, whenever I have expectations, they are disappointed. I guess that's a lesson for myself. So anyway, I had expectations because this genre, the cozy genre, has been popular for quite a while, and I knew that the Spellshop is said to be one of the best examples of the genre. So I was hoping that it's gonna be, you know, cozy, cute. I will have nice, cute feelings, just enjoy my time with the book without any kind of tension, pressure like that. I think I gave it also just 3 stars, and that's because even though I enjoyed what was promised, the cozy feeling that you get hugged by this book, that feeling was there, and that's really nice, and that's why I gave those 3 stars. But just like with the first book, The Gentleman Was Right, it felt like some of the characters were quite rushed, especially Kayla, I think, or Keela, her name, the main character. Especially in the beginning, it felt like the author didn't give her the appropriate pace for her to experience her feelings. And Keela, if you know the plot is that she and her sentient plant friend Cass, they're fleeing the city in which she worked as a librarian, and they're fleeing because the city is being on fire because there's a rebellion. So she's running away from war. She's uprooting her whole life. On top of that, she's, I think, also neurodiverse. So yeah, so she's going through quite a traumatic time, and it felt to me like the author just pushed the plot further and brought Keela and Cass into this island cottage that she used to live in and just propelled the whole plot forward without giving her the proper time to grieve, to experience those traumatic feelings, live through them properly, just because the book was supposed to be cozy book. So that was one thing that I didn't like. Another thing, the romance. Yeah, I'm quite tired of men in the romance, especially when the romance is just between straight people. The guy is quite often just, you know, muscular, handsome guy, and that's it. As if there's nothing more about his personality, and that felt disappointing because the Spellshop is written quite good. You know, the author is definitely a good writer, and she knows how to create the atmosphere, and side characters were wonderful. Felt sometimes that they had more personality to them than the main two characters. But Lorraine, the main love interest, he was just that. He was a handsome guy with a lot of muscles, is good with tools, so he can build the main character bookshelves from the floor to the ceiling. I mean, that's nice, but I wish there was more to his personality. And of course, we do get to meet him a little bit. He's kind, he helps Kyla, but that's just it. There's nothing more or less. And we do get kind of glimpses of him having a backstory. Something happened with his parents, or they didn't love him that much, or were they not good people? I don't remember. But it's just that it's not touched upon very deeply, or as deep as it could have been. And it's just all of these feelings of the main characters that are somewhat deeper or somewhat more uncomfortable are just being skimmed. And I think that's done because of the supposed coziness of the book. So yeah, while I enjoyed the set coziness, I didn't like that. And sometimes also the book felt boring. So yeah, let's just push forward. So the fourth book that I read was written by Emma Alban. I'm sorry again if I'm mispronouncing the name. And the title is Don't Want You Like a Best Friend. And it's another historical romance, but this time it's focused on a queer romance. So a romance between two ladies. And yeah, it was another book where I had a lot of expectations. The same story. Expectations mean disappointment to me. I guess this is gonna be the title of the video. Expectations versus disappointment. So the two main characters are Gwen and Beth, and they're two young ladies, debutantes in the Victorian times, and they meet at a ball. Gwen is already out for, I think, for the fourth season as a debutante, and Beth, for her, it's the first season, so everything's new and she's kind of stressed about that. She also has these huge expectations placed on her shoulders because her mother, who's a widow, she's, well, not forcing pressuring her, maybe is the word, to look suit her so that they could, better their situation financially and probably societally, socially is the word, maybe. Yeah. So there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress for Beth, and she meets Gwen, and Gwen helps her relax. In that first ball, she introduces her to her other friends, and in general, they just have a great time together. And from there on, they spend more and more time together. Gwen, she also has a single parent. I think her mother died, and her father, which we find out later, was previously in love with the mother of Beth. So in this book, we also get kind of two love stories at once. So the love story of Beth and Gwen, and then the love story between their parents, the mother of Beth and the father of Gwen. I think I gave this book 4 stars because I did enjoy it a little bit more than The Gentleman Was Right, the other Victorian romance that I read. The 1 star that I took off was because there were a lot of names, a lot of side characters that didn't improve the plot, didn't improve the story, didn't give that much to the book, and were probably kind of misleading, or not misleading, but I guess they were just unnecessary, I would say. I felt that this book could have done with a little bit more editing, or better editing in that sense. Otherwise, I really loved the romance between Beth and Gwen. Both of them are pretty cute characters. The book is funny, they're cheeky, it's a queer romance, so that's nice in itself. And the side story of them setting up sort of a parent trap situation for their parents, that was also very cute. And yeah, I had great time. It could have been edited better. The 5th book that I read this year was An Elephant in the Garden. It was written by Michael Morpurgo. Hope I pronounced that right. And it's another historical fiction book. This time, topic is war, the Second World War, and the book is inspired by the real events that happened in Dresden, in Germany. The main character is Lizzie, and the whole story focuses on her, her mother, and her little brother Carly, who are forced to flee their home to run away from Dresden being bombed, and their refugee journey to meet American ally soldiers. We meet Lizzie in this book sort of in a second timeline when she's already grown up. She's an older lady who's living in Canada and in an older people home where she meets a nurse and her son Carl, and immediately his name reminds her of her little brother Carly, so she decides to tell her story to them. And her story is a little bit unbelievable, and the nurse, Carl's mother, starts out listening to the story not believing it, and then slowly finds that the story was actually true, for that Lizzie went through it. And the unbelievable moment in her story is that for a while Lizzie had an elephant in the garden, just like the title suggests. And the way that happened is that her mother, when the war started in Germany, I think she lost her job, and then she found a new job in the local zoo. And the zoo, because the animals are basically considered to be dangerous in the time of war, that like if the city gets bombed and the animals escape, then they're like an additional danger to the people. So the zoo administration decides to kill those animals beforehand, and the mother, trying to save the young elephant that she got already attached to, suggests that she's gonna take the elephant and let her in their garden, in their like her personal home garden. And that's where Lizzie and Carly, the little brother, meet the elephant. And when the city gets bombarded, they flee, and they are, because of the situation, they're forced to take the elephant with them. And the whole story of them surviving that journey through the forest, through the winter in war without basically any resources, is just a very poignant story about what it means to experience this kind of event, war, what it means to flee for your life, what it means to care for your children, to care for your husband who's at the front fighting for a war he didn't want to fight for, what it means to be a teenager. Lizzie was a teenager when that happened. What it means for her to fall in love with someone during the war. Just all of those human sensitivities that can be quite difficult to write about, I imagine, because obviously they're difficult to live through. But what I liked about this book is that it was written very sensitively, very beautifully. There was enough space for those feelings to be explored, even though this was a middle grade book. So that was unexpected, and that I really liked about the book and the whole story. The unexpected motive of an elephant during the war, it made me kind of feel stupid for a moment there, because I never really, like, I always thought about, what's happening to the people on both sides of the war, that there's always so many innocent people dying and things like that. But I never realized that, yeah, there's animals as well. What happens to all those farm animals, zoo animals, wild animals, pets? So it was a very nicely written book for me to expand my horizon, so to say. I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read, that was already, I think, the last one, the 6th book, and the book that's probably gonna be the most controversial one out of all of the ones I'm gonna talk about, and that is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. If you've been on the internet, on Goodreads, and in general in the reading community for a moment at least, you've probably heard about Rebecca Yarros and her series Empyrean. Onyx Storm is the 3rd book in the series. The first was Fourth Wing, second one was Iron Flame, and this is the 3rd one, the Onyx Storm. Obviously, I read the first 2 books when they came out, and I was quite excited to read the 3rd one, even though going into it, I had already expected it not to be so great, because while I liked the first book, I didn't like the second one at all. Well, I enjoyed reading it, but it was, in my opinion, not a good book, and I didn't like it that much. So I was thinking, okay, this is the 3rd book in the series. It was supposed to be a trilogy, but then the author decided to make 5 books, which was weird. weird already for me. And it was surprisingly enjoyable, this third book. And I know that there's a lot of discussion about Rebecca Yarros and her books. Some people even think that she actually didn't write her own books, that those books were written by AI. I'm not gonna go into that discussion at all because it's not on me to blame or judge the author for what I don't know. So in this third book, we're already quite far away in the story. We've already met Violet, or Violence, how her lover calls her, and we've already met Sawdon, the other main character, her love interest. The second book ended on a cliffhanger of him turning venin. The book has a magical system with dragons, the dragon riders, which one of them is Violet and Sawdon as well. And then there are the bad guys who are called venins, and their dragons are called wyverns, I think. I don't know how to pronounce that kind of word. So we already know a lot about the main characters and their surrounding group of characters, like their friends that we met in the other books. And we don't learn that much in this book about them anymore, which was also quite surprising for me. Like, there's this huge magical system in the book, and it's a fantasy book. Yeah, romantasy, like some people call it, but still there's a fantasy element. So there's a lot of world building. There's a lot of characters that we kind of already know, but we would like to know more about them. And the author just does nothing with that. It felt to me like this book was sort of an information dump, like a filler, a book that's not entirely necessary for the story, for the plot to move on, because we're still in the war, we're still fighting the venins. Sawdon is still sort of a venin beginner. Venin, so to say. The second book ended on that cliffhanger that he turned Venin. He used the power from the magical system to save Violet, and there's nothing progressing in the storyline of him. The whole book, he's just trying to fight it. He's not embracing it, but he's also not fully succeeding in fighting it. Violet is just still being her sort of irritable and irritating self. She's still doubting most of her actions and most of her choices. Their love story is still irritating to me because this is a third book already. We know you guys are in love already. We went through this enemies to lovers trope in the first book, and then we got some communication between you guys in the second book, and now in the third book it feels like it's all over again. This push and pull between them. Sawdon saying, "Oh, I don't want you to come close to me because now I'm a venin, so you should be careful of me," and her being just, "Oh, he's so sexy, just look at the guy, he's so handsome," all of these apps. Just like, we know that already. We know he's handsome. We know he loves you. We know you have a lot of passion in the spice world. It's just nothing more to their relationship in this book. That no additional layer, no deeper communication. Their love is basically based on lust, which is, I was kind of surprised. So he's the bad guy now, finally. The bad guy turned bad guy. And, you know, at any given point, he can lose control and take powers from the earth, from the magical system, and from the other people. So I was hoping, you know, they're not gonna do the deed so often, and still the author found a way to let them do the deed. So yeah, that was kind of unnecessary in my eyes. At least that's not the part of the book that I enjoyed. The other thing is that while I am not ready to discuss the fact that the writing is not as good, and maybe it is written by AI, who knows? I'm not gonna discuss that, like I said. It is still kind of dry writing. I don't know how else to say it. Like I said, it feels a lot of the times like we're just getting bombarded with all of these names, these side characters who appear without any further explanation and then die, and we're supposed to feel for them, but we don't know them, so we don't feel anything for them. So we're just bombarded with new characters, new names, new events. Where in this book we're on a quest, which it would be interesting, but we're jumping from one island to another island. And while a quest might be an interesting thing to write about because it promises adventures and promises sort of some kind of tension, you know, promises growth for the characters, there's none of that. Of course, we get to know like a little bit the traditions of different islands, more about the world or the universe we're in, but not as much that it would be really interesting, not as much that that quest would feel personal to the reader, or that, you know, that I would be so interested that I would think, okay, I want to go on this quest with you guys. But no, it doesn't feel like that because the writing is just forced and dry. The dialogue between the characters is kind of forced as well. I feel kind of bad saying all of these things about this book because I know there's a huge following for Rebecca Yarros, and I know how sensitive it might feel for people who love something as much and then they hear, okay, there are people who don't love it as much. That can be because it's books, it's art. Art is a very subjective and a very personal thing. I'm not saying this to criticize anyone, especially not the author, because like I said in the beginning of the video, I know that writing a book is a difficult thing and art is so subjective. So that's why I feel bad saying all of these things. It feels to me like this story, this whole world, this magical world with all of these nice dragons, who by the way are probably the best characters in the books, for me at least. It feels like there's so much potential there, and in none of these books, these 3 books, that potential is being let to flourish. Like, it's just that, it's just potential, and that's kind of sad. No matter how good you create the skeleton of the story, if you are not able to flesh it out completely, it doesn't work, or at least it didn't work for me. Yeah, that's sad. And also, that's a little bit confusing because while on one hand I know that it's trash, sorry. So while I know it's kind of trash, but on the other hand, I also kind of like trash, I guess. Because, like, there were moments in the book in Onyx Storm that I like. Like I said, the dragons are such beautiful characters, and I wish the whole book was just the dragons doing their thing without none of the half-assed other characters. So I enjoyed that. There was also one moment where something huge happens, and spoiler, Andarna, Violet's second dragon, leaves, and that kind of broke my heart, and I was sobbing. To be honest, it was probably 2 a.m. when I was reading that part, and I might have been sleep deprived a little bit, and so my emotions were heightened, and that's why I was sobbing so much. So that was touching. But yeah, I guess I like trash, but I also didn't like it. And that's what's confusing for me about this book, and that's what's sad as well, because I can feel there's this huge potential and it's just not fleshed out. It could have been done better. This book could have not existed because it's just basically an informational filler. I just hope that Rebecca Yarros, I'm all for her earning her cash. I'm all for her using this well-earned fame for her own benefit. And still, it would be nice if the next book was a little bit higher on the execution than these first 3 ones. I guess that's all I'm gonna say about Onyx Storm, because I don't want to be getting death threats from the stands. I am also, in a certain way, a fan of Rebecca Yarros and of this series. I am for sure gonna be reading the other 2 books just because I want to know what happens to the characters, even though there's probably gonna be a bazillion other characters that will be introduced again and will die in those books immediately. You know, like the, what's her name now? That new bad lady that we're introduced in Onyx Storm, the sage lady, the Venin. I can't remember her name, but it doesn't really matter because we meet her in this book for the first time, and then we're made to feel as if she's such a huge deal and Violet's supposed to be so scared of her because maybe she's a lightning wielder, maybe she's like the scariest of them all, and then she just dies at the end of the book by getting this knife from the goddess, from the temple, like made out of stone of the actual temple for that goddess, and she just kills the sorceress and we never hear about her again. So what's up with that? I thought we were running from that other guy, Sage, other bad guy, but now in this book we were running from this bad lady. Who was she? Why was she actually needed? All of these things make me feel like this book was actually just a filler, just a cash grab, and while I'm happy for the author to get her cash, it would feel more earned if she would tap more into her potential and would flesh it out. Let's just end on this note. Let me just repeat that I did enjoy the book. I gave it, at first, I actually gave it 5 stars. Just that first moment, once I finished the last page, I was in this kind of emotional state where I gave it 5 stars because it is a gripping book. The writing is just very easy, very, I would say, middle grade, but audience is supposedly adults. So it's easy to read. And then I had a few days to think about it, and I lowered my rating to 3 stars. I do like this book, but I also don't like this book. I guess it's one of those books that you love to hate. That's it. Those were my 6 books of the first month of the year 2025, and I'm gonna end my video here. Thank you if you made it to the ending. Thank you for bearing with me. This is my first video. I also filmed it in the car. I don't know if I mentioned this, but it was a really nice day, and I just wanted to enjoy being outside. But then if I do actually film it outside, it's gonna be very windy and you wouldn't be able to hear anything. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what kind of books you read in January. Let me know if you've read Onyx Storm, because everyone's now in that little bubble of this book just coming out. I hope you leave this video as if you were just on a call with a friend talking about the books you love, and I hope you do come back. If you like this video, please press like, please subscribe. I'm gonna upload more videos. There's gonna be coziness, there's gonna be books, art, and just life in your 30s, looking for simple, slow life. Bye!